Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is August 14th, 2019. In just a moment, we're going to be back with your state, marine, and aviation forecast. Remember, you can always go and dial our number to get our information by 1-800-472-0391. And you also have the option to find our information on the internet at weather.gov/Alaska, and then just click on the map areas of your choice. Now let's go on to the topics of the day. I'm going to step off the screen here just a moment so you can take a peek at this. Right now we have ongoing rainfall across the interior locations, and this is going to bring high water levels for rivers, creeks, and streams across areas from Denali and north, and we're going to show you some more information on that in just a moment. But if you're in the Denali Park area, be on the lookout for mudslides and rock slides. And also, in addition to this, we have gusty winds that are going to be increasing across the Panhandle on Friday and Saturday. And this is going to be mainly for the northern and central channels. And we're going to give a quick mention for Fairbanks too. They're going to see some winds increasing across the interior on Friday. And these winds are going to range between 20 to 35 miles per hour. Now let's take a look at the watches that we already have out there. This is basically along the Denali Park locations and for Fairbanks, including the Chena Hot Springs locations. Now the rivers and streams out in these locations are going to be increasing. We're expecting additional rain amounts between 1 to 2 inches for Thursday and Friday. So rivers and streams are expected to be on the increase through the end of the week. So be on the lookout for updates by going to our website. Those updates are available there, and we'll also be updating, of course, our program once a day. Now let's go on to the weather that's bringing the fire weather. The fire weather across the state is on the decrease, however. So the good thing with the rain is that we're not seeing fire hazards. We do still have area of hazards across the central interior of the Kenai and across the northern areas of the Panhandle. Now let's take a look at the weather systems moving in our direction. First of all, I just wanted to note this stream of moisture plume that's coming across the interior. That's along the jet stream, and that's overrunning a ridge that's sitting to the south. Now out here to the west, around the western Aleutians, a spinning low pressure system is located out there over Shimia. Now for the eastern locations and the southern mainland, mainly the ridge that's centered just south of the Alaska Peninsula is in control. So putting this into motion, you can see there's a bit of clouds and moisture that is overspreading the area, but mainly low clouds across the Gulf waters with a marine layer that's developing, and mainly over the central waters for the Gulf. We did see some clearing across the western areas of the Gulf. Here's that ridge centered just south of the Alaska Peninsula. 1,032 millibar ridge is holding strong, spreading some fog across the perimeter of the ridge all the way out through the southeast. It had made it into the outer waters and channels this morning. However, conditions since then improved. Rain has tapered off across much of the southern areas of the state, and we're primarily seeing the next push of rain today just moving into the Kuskokwim Delta. There is a little bit of a gusty wind conditions across this boundary along the north coast, with some light rain and fog along the coast locations to the north. Now here across the eastern areas of the Bering, fog persisting with the ridge in control, and the next low pressure system is on its way towards Shimia, which is going to hold its place overnight, bring some rain and foggy conditions, and this low will just sit around a 992 millibar system. However, the winds are going to be quite gusty in between the low pressure and high pressure, as it just kind of squeezes the pressure gradient between the two of them. So we're expecting gusts between 30 to 45 miles per hour there out of the south, and then lighter wind speeds and fog just to the east. Now as we head into the day on Thursday, not much change in the system. It will stay as a stacked mature system, deepening slightly, and the persistent ridge across or just south of the Alaska Peninsula will creep a little bit further to the north, with that influence really moving across the southwest. We do have another short wave that's going to be moving For the first wave this evening is moving ahead of the low pressure from the west, but we also have a good disturbance that's moving from a low pressure system that's dropping out of the Arctic North there. So with this surface low pressure system, we're going to see some new development as we head into the end of the week. So for tomorrow, it kind of switches to this low pressure system that's going to be helping to push some more moisture and lift across the central interior. Now for the southeast, they're going to be mainly dry during the day, but as we head into the late day overnight hours, possibly seeing some rain moving into the northern channels locations. Now for Friday, that's where we're going to see quite a few changes across the area, because we are expecting the front to the north to be carried and pushed a little bit further to the south. The actual surface low kind of holds back in the northwest coast, but the upper level disturbance is really going to be making a move across the state, and that's why we're seeing this pressure gradient increase, and we're going to see that south to westerly flow across the interior. At the same time, we'll have a southerly flow up across the inner channels here. The central and northern areas are going to see between 20 to 30 knot winds for the marine areas. And then as we head into Friday night into Saturday, we'll see a wind direction change to the north. Now for south central, fairly mild day on Friday. However, look for those winds also to start increasing towards the Prince William Sound as this pressure gradient tightens and kind of shifts over towards the east. Meanwhile, the ridge keeps a hold across the Alaska Peninsula with a low pressure system holding also to the west, so continued gusty flow through the southern and central areas of the Bering, and fog conditions will also continue. Now let's take a look at your temperatures across the state for tonight. Fairly mild, just temperatures dropping down into the low to mid 50s for most of the southern and interior locations, possible upper 40s for a couple locations around Fairbanks. And along the northern areas, that's where we're seeing that the colder air mass settling to the south, with temperatures possible into the upper 30s. For the Bering, temperatures will be right around 50 degrees plus or minus a degree or two. And then for the coastal locations of the Gulf, expect temperatures ranging in the low 50s to near 60 degrees. As we head into Thursday, another warm day across the southwest, especially with that ridge in control, and very warm conditions across most of the south central locations. Otherwise, just mild 50s, upper 50s to 60 degrees, up to mid 60s there in the Arctic Valley area. Along the north coastal areas, you'll see that difference up there with the temperatures only getting into the mid 40s. For the southeast, another warm day with temperatures increasing into the mid 60s to 70s. Across the Bering locations, expect temperatures between 55 and 60 degrees. A little bit warmer across Bristol Bay area as you get into there, into the mid 60s to upper 60s. Now for Friday morning, temperatures are going to be very similar. The most notable trends will be across the Brooks Range and north, where those temperatures are going to be cooling, and we are really expecting them to drop below 40 degrees for your Friday morning. And then temperatures will range between the low 50s to upper 50s across most of the rest of the state, including the southeast. Now as we head into Friday afternoon, another warm day with that ridge still in control for much of the south. Temperatures will rise back into at least the lower 70s. The rest of the state, the cooler temperatures to the north in the lower 40s, and then the southeast reaching the mid 60s. And for the Bering locations, looking at those temperatures staying moderated in the mid 50s. So in just a moment, we'll be back with your aviation forecasts.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
All right, and let's take a look at your flying weather for Thursday. Starting off the day, we're looking at widespread IFR and MVFR conditions, especially along the coastal locations and across the southeast and Gulf and Bering. We will see a little bit of VFR sneaking in the Susitna Valley, western areas of the Kenai down towards Kodiak, and just a little bit of an area across the Copper River Basin. Across the Bering on Thursday morning, widespread IFR. Not going to see too much improvement during the afternoon hours. However, the Alaska Peninsula should see some breaks into the VFR category during the Thursday afternoon time frame, hanging on to an IFR ceiling just south of the Brooks Range towards the northwest coast and along the northern tier of the state, staying in MVFR. Now for the southeast, improvement to MVFR for the most part, a little bit of VFR as you head towards the northern parts of the Panhandle, looking at widespread IFR across the Gulf with marine stratus setting up. And we do have some clearing across the southern and eastern areas of the state and also along the eastern areas of the Brooks Range. Now let's take a look at your Friday. Friday is going to start out very similar with IFR and MVFR conditions across the state and surrounding waters, with some breaks there across the east and southern areas of the state. IFR widespread across the Bering. Now for Friday afternoon, you will see some more improvement across the south and southwest locations, and the Alaska Peninsula probably will stay in the MVFR category for Friday afternoon. Along the northern tier of the state, look for IFR conditions setting up across the northern coast. However, a little bit of the Brooks Range there will be breaking out into the MVFR category. The southeast will have the MVFR and IFR mainly just along the coastal locations. MVFR, however, is going to be across the inner channels up through the mountains there for the most part during the afternoon. So main breaks will be from the Ketchikan and South Sitka South. They'll be right on the line there for the marine stratus. Now let's take a look at your passes in more depth. Anaktuvuk Pass is going to be MVFR all day. Adigan will go MVFR to VFR. And then Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will go IFR to MVFR. And then we'll see Rainy MVFR to VFR, however, looking at the west side, staying MVFR. Windy will go IFR to MVFR, and Isabel will be IFR to VFR. And Mentasta will also be MVFR to VFR, and Tanita will go MVFR to VFR. Portage will go MVFR to VFR, and Chilkoot and White Pass is expected to go from IFR to VFR. Now looking at the freezing levels for tomorrow morning, we'll have the surface freezing level off to the north and then going from 4,000 to 12,000 feet across the state, with heights climbing to 14,000 across the southwest and a little bit higher south of the eastern Aleutians. So pretty much same trends there across the northern Bering. However, this warmer air masses bring the 14 to 12,000 feet levels across most of the Bering waters. For icing, the main concerns are going to be across the northern tier of the state, below 8,000 feet. And then for the jet stream location, we're seeing a very similar amplified pattern, not too much change from the previous day. So for Thursday, only small changes, and a matter of fact, just a little bit more of a retrograding pattern for this low pressure and high pressure, which remains in control with a very strong jet streak on the north side there at 120 knots. Looking at the 9,000 foot level, we have the ridging in a stacked position over the Alaska Peninsula. So strong southerly flow between this ridge and low pressure out to the western Aleutians there, 65 to 70 knots over the central Aleutians. Onshore flow is going to range between 30 to 45 knots as we have a strong squeeze in between the low pressures to the north and the high to the south. And so for the southeast, actually, this is going to be where you're going to see the lighter wind speeds between 10 and 20 knots across the eastern Gulf waters and the southeast. So for your 3,000 foot level, look for a very similar pattern, lighter wind speeds across the southeast with 20 to 30 knots across the state out of the west direction. A little bit of change of wind direction around the ridge itself, and then the gradient squeeze will produce 40 to 65 knot flow there. So to sum up for your turbulence, look for turbulence mainly across the interior west coast locations and out across the Aleutian chain. No problems there for the southeast.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again, talking about the augmented reality sandbox, is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version. Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney. And
this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at GINA, up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they
Yeah.
came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that, and to see how it reacts in time, and
Right.
it's a dynamic learning tool, and it
Dynamic,
responds.
That's exactly the word.
And
Yeah.
you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching
Right.
tool for
Where does it
topography
go?
can it have? You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event
Right.
on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking
kidding.
Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney. Thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts. And now, marine weather around Alaska.
All right, we are going to wrap up the show with your marine forecast, first looking at the ice edge. We're not seeing much change really, except more melting through the next day or two, as those have been the trends, of course, through the end of the summer. That is typical for this time of the year. Now let's look at your southeast forecast for Thursday, looking at primarily a southerly flow across the inner channels, except as you get towards the Dixon Strait, the winds are going to be a little bit more northwesterly. The outer waters will be a westerly flow around 15 knots, and seas on this day will be 2 feet across the inner waters and around 6 feet across the outer waters. Now let's take a look at your Friday forecast, still keeping that persistent southerly flow, a little bit stronger up inlet, possible gusts during the afternoon developing for the Lynn Canal, up to 30 knots for those locations, and then 20 knots across the outer waters. Seas will be a little bit higher this day, with 3 to 4 feet across the inner channels and 7 feet across the outer waters. Taking a look at the north and western Gulf waters, we'll see the strongest winds at the southern tip of the Kenai and across the western waters out of the west at 25 knots, so small craft out that way. And otherwise, we'll see a primarily southwesterly flow, uniform between 10 to 15 knots. Seas for the northern inlet and the Prince William Sound will be around 2 feet, with 4 to 8 feet across the western Gulf and near the Kenai Peninsula. For Friday, expecting stronger winds yet, between 25 to 35 knots around the peninsula to the south and east directions. The winds are going to be out of the west to northwest, with the flow bringing gales for the southern tip of the Kenai towards the Kodiak Island area. So the wave heights on this day are going to be between 3 to 5 feet for the northern inlet locations, Prince William Sound, and the Gulf waters are going to see between 6 to 12 feet. The highest sea is, of course, with those stronger gale force winds. For your Thursday forecast across the Alaska Peninsula, wind directional changes with that ridge being so close, but winds are primarily 20 knots or less across the peninsula locations, with seas between 3 to 5 feet on Friday. On Friday, we're going to see those winds and waves increasing, with a small craft advisory there just to the south of the peninsula. And then the flow from north to northwest will generally be 15 to 20 knots. Seas on this day will be 4 feet across the Bering side and 5 to 6 feet for the Pacific side. Taking a look at the Aleutians, very strong winds out there between 25 to 40 knots for most of the locations, and we're looking at seas on this day to range between 6 to 17 feet with the highest sea heights across the central Aleutians, 18 feet there near Atka. And then for Friday, looking at the same southerly to easterly flow around the Aleutian chain with gales once again. Seas on this day will be ranging between 5 to 16 feet, the highest seas near the central Aleutians. And we'll see the west coast, a little bit gustier conditions as well, between 20 to 25 knots. So small crafts out there for your Thursday with seas between 5 to 9 feet. For Friday, expect a little bit lower wind speeds, and the wind directions will be a little bit shifty out there depending where you're at, from north to southwest and becoming south again towards the central waters, with the highest seas between 8 to 11 feet across the central waters, along the coastal locations between 4 to 7 feet. Now let's take a look at the north and northwest coast. Looking at speeds all under small craft advisory, so between 10 and 20 knots. We'll see a north to west flow across the north coast and a little bit more of an offshore pattern around towards Kotzebue Sound and towards Norton Sound. Another change in direction there to the southwest. Seas on this day will be between 4 to 6 feet. For your Friday, looking at stronger wind speeds coming around towards the Bering Strait there and Kotzebue Sound. Looking at towards the south, a little bit lower wind speeds towards Norton Sound. Seas on this day will be a little bit higher, between 4 to 10 feet, with the higher seas coming in with the stronger wind areas. Now let's take a look and recap your forecast through the next few days. We're expecting this rainfall to persist across the central interior, with some shower activity making it into the southeast. And we'll want to watch out for those rainy areas across the interior, as they're expecting 1 to 2 inches.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.